Okay, good afternoon and good evening, everybody. Welcome back to Coast-to-Coast EVs, your fortnightly asterisk forecast charge on electric vehicles and infrastructure. This is one of our little off-week, in-week kind of scenarios where we're having a bonus episode this week. Then something is happening next week that we decided to avoid, so you can all bask in the news cycle for the next week or two, and then we'll continue on after that. But you can always check out plugandplayev.com and the Coast to Coast EVs show page. There will give you all the latest, greatest, the guests, the links to the past episodes, replays, and what's coming up in the future. Try to keep that updated every few days, so it's usually the best place to find what we're up to. And then a reminder, we are available next day, typically by noon Eastern time on all your favorite podcast platforms, so Apple Music, Spotify, Amazon Music, all the places that those things occur. I am joined for the start here with my co-hosts, Mr. Walter Schultze down in North Carolina of the Network Architect channel, and Mr. Eric Way over on the West Coast with the News Coolum channel. How is everybody doing?
We're pretty good here. I understand in California it's a little bit tough going with the weather, and fire season started early or something.
Well, it's going late. I mean, I think we have some fires, but we were down into the 30s last night. So, yeah.
Okay. Well, Massachusetts had a red flag warning, which shocked the S out of me. So apparently there's even fires up in Salem, which is maybe a Halloween thing, but it's not just limited to the West Coast, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But at least everyone's safe and sound for the moment and doing well. We are in our 26.5 episode today talking used EVs with Jesse Law, the founder of Greenwave Electric Vehicles over here in New England, which we'll be onto in a little bit here. We're going to quickly take a little midpoint for some EV infrastructure items before we move on to the used EV market. And we're talking about new EV infrastructure players making progress. Now, it's kind of a few different folks in this news this week. My eye was attracted by BP Pulse, who we were talking about a little bit before the episode started here, and their slightly promiscuous approach to sourcing EV hardware, charging hardware at least. Eric was mentioning that a site near him is using the tritium chargers. We know they've used FreeWire in other instances, but the news about a year ago now was the Tesla superchargers, and BP Pulse being one of the first, potentially first, to use superchargers outside of the supercharger network. So we did find out, or I've kind of figured from some folks' posts on X from planning permits, that BP Pulse has this site in Troutdale, Oregon, which is up on the screen here, which is a fairly bog standard, the Travel Centers of America, which BP owns. There's BP Pulse going in there. Good little spot off of I-84, I believe it is. And then on this one, which may be hard to see, you'll note that they have a mix of both Tesla superchargers and Alpitronic. It looks like 2 Alpitronics and 8 Tesla superchargers. So that one kind of got me as not that we were not necessarily surprised that BP Pulse was using either of those, because we know from the agreement with Simon, I believe, if I can bring that up, that they're using Alpitronics there, just kind of from the looks of the announcement and the press release renders. And then we had the announcement, like I say, a year ago, that they are using Tesla superchargers, possibly for fleet applications, some of their other locations. But that one's an interesting mix of, but 2 real kind of stalwarts, or the reliability side is certainly what we're looking to Alpitronic and superchargers to deliver. Any initial thoughts, Eric, as you're thinking about visiting BP Pulse sites in your area?
Yeah, well, I mean, that one I think is certainly a slightly better site. I think that's about right sized, right? When you look at the overall power, so you essentially have basically the equivalent of, what would that be? Almost a 1.5 megawatt, probably.
Pretty close, right? Because even with the Alpitronics, you're talking close to
like
kilowatts.
Yeah, so like 400 split between 2 stalls. So Or actually, you said 4 Alpitronic units.
Yeah, it's two dispensers, but 4 stalls. So you're going to be close to maybe a 2 megawatt.
Yeah, so about 12 stalls overall. I do like that sizing over there near Portland, I believe it is. So yeah, I kind of like that. Obviously, I'm interested in having pull through stalls as well, and that sort of higher power distribution. I'm kind of curious with their Tesla superchargers, though, how that access is going to work. Like you said, BP has been pretty agnostic with hardware up to this point. So their back-end software, just making sure that it's access. I believe it was EV Connect at one point in time. Weren't they using that? But I'm not sure. So yeah, I'm curious. Yeah.
Agnostic is a better word than promiscuous, for sure. So,
I mean, I think we can go with both, right?
Yours is kind of.
Yeah.
Walter, what are you thinking in terms of, obviously we'll move on in a sec here to IONNA and the kind of mainstay of what will become Alpitronic's first big client, you would think, but BP Pulse entering the mix, interesting to you, slightly oddity? What are you thinking?
Alpitronic opened their offices less than a year ago here in Charlotte, North Carolina, and already they've scored 3 very large customers: BP Pulse, IONNA, and the Mercedes-Benz Charging Hub. Those are 3 big wins all at once. And I almost am concerned about their production capacity. How many of these things can they actually produce? Because I think we'll be hitting a wall here pretty soon. But I did see the site plans that you brought up there, and I went over them kind of with a fine-tooth comb. And the first thought that I had is I really like Big Oil's solution to charging. When they need a couple extra CCS, they're like, just throw in some hyperchargers, $250,000 or $300,000. It's like loose pocket change. Previously, something like that would have been, we'd have to husband our resources and get the government involved and everything. When Big Oil shows up, they're like, we'll get 2 of them, 4 stalls. There you go. Problem solved. And move on with our lives. So BP Pulse seems to be turning up the steam with their electric vehicle charging deployments throughout, not only in the United States, but elsewhere as well. And so that's good, because if you look at how far those are away from the building, and it's actually mentioned in the site plan, it's very close to the amenities. So nothing's better than having a 24/7 facility close by that's got safety and convenience and restrooms right there. So I think it's going to be great.
So,
and you touched on IONNA there briefly. Sorry, Eric wanted to.
Oh, go ahead, Steve.
Yeah. So, I mean, I just wanted to make sure we draw attention whilst we're on the topic to Walter's video from the Apex IONNA site in North Carolina, which looks a little bit like this right now. That's the original building that's still there in Walter's video, but should be transformed to this, possibly within a few months, depending on how quick it is. But the OWL services team are on site there, Walter, from what I could see at the banners, and they're renowned for the Pilot Flying J's, the Circle K's, turning these around pretty quickly. We'll direct people to your video for the most update, but anything you want to kind of touch on that before we move off infrastructure?
Yeah, I was just kind of going through what kind of milestones are left on the project plan, and they need a certificate of occupancy. To get a certificate of occupancy, they need to have a business license also. I don't know if those have already been taken care of. They also need to have the power delivered, transformer. They need to have the asphalt put down and the site graded, the landscaping. The actual facility itself hasn't really been touched yet, so they need to gut it and refurbish it in short order in order to make the Christmas time. And we're talking less than 8 weeks. Those are a lot of milestones. They'd really have to run the boards in order to get this puppy in before Christmas, but I guess anything's possible.
Should be interesting to see. Go ahead, Eric.
Yeah, and the only other thing is I believe at one point in time, didn't the Alpitronic, you're talking about volume, Walter, Alpitronic in Europe actually had to slow their production capacity at a certain point, I believe, because they ran out of customers because they had overbuilt their production capacity. I really don't anticipate that for North America, just given the size compared to, and the automobile ownership of North America compared to Europe. But it seems like they're very capable of ramping up. So it'll be it'll be interesting to see.
We're excited. I think it's just the beginning here. We're seeing the first rumblings of what is going to be a huge kind of seismic shift in the US and North American EV charging landscape. So exciting time to be involved with EV infrastructure for sure. But our focus today is back to electric vehicles, models and makes, and specifically pre-owned electric vehicles. That's what we're covered on the previous episode last week from the consumer perspective, but we're privileged today to be joined by Jesse Law, who is the CEO and founder of Greenwave Electric Vehicles up in North Hampton, New Hampshire. Jesse, thanks for joining us. Hopefully you can hear us okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Can you guys hear me?
Yep, we got you. It's all good.
Fantastic. Yeah, I will admit I didn't stay at the office all night, and I'm not on Hawaii time. This is a virtual background, but I wanted to also thank you for representing Greenwave there. You're back, Steve.
Yeah, it seemed like the most appropriate place with the most different used EVs on the lot, but I'll let you talk to that because you're the expert.
Well, it's great to be here. Thank you so much for having me on. Wow, such powerful information coming from you guys on the charging infrastructure nationwide. Stuff I'm not even tapped into, but incredible stuff. Thank you so much for all this, and thanks for the opportunity. So what do you want to know about the used EV market?
Everything all at once. No, I think, it'd be useful. Obviously, I've linked up in the description and the start of the video here. If anyone was early, the first visit I did to Greenwave last year, and it was a different time, a different place, and I think the used EV market changes monthly, and you've now been in business for years. So maybe you tell us a little bit about where we started and where you are now, just to kind of give us a flavor of how the used EV market got to where it is.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Steve. So we're coming up on our 2 years since we incorporated, November 7th, 2022, and we rushed to get our doors open in February, set up the whole spot, got our lines of credit, started buying inventory. We didn't really know the used EV market. I had a new EV. I'd been driving EV for a couple of years. I thought they were awesome. I did certainly some considerable research. I was finishing up my MBA program. And so I had a plan, but you know what they say about plans, right? So it was really difficult through the first few months as we were building it up. I think when you saw us, Steve, I was still trying to convince people that we were an actual car dealership, right? And so I had the button-down suit and everything, and I think in that video, very, very professionally dressed. Now you see, I got the baseball cap, I got the hoodie. This is how I am at Greenwave, because we're not your typical car dealership. And that transformation has really happened in conversation with our customers and what they want their experience to be in making that transition to an electric vehicle, right? About 90% of the people who buy from Greenwave are first time EV buyers, right? That's really where it's at. And 10% are usually upgrading from a Gen 1, right? From a 2014 Nissan Leaf. They're ready to get more than 70 miles on a charge, right? And that's really the market that's capturing right now. We went from, last September we sold 20 cars, and we were all high-fiving each other, saying this is incredible. We're on our way. We were we eked out the smallest profit. And in August of this year, Greenwave delivered 50 electric vehicles, which was awesome. We were really excited. So in terms of our growth, that's kind of how it's been going, but it's an up and down. Every month is up or down, and this month is decidedly down. The car business in general, as you probably know, has been very tumultuous since the pandemic, with the chip shortage and the production delays, et cetera, et cetera. We don't need to get into all that. But what I tell people often, and this is what we lived through, lucky for us, in our first year in business, we lived through an unprecedented depreciating, devaluing of a certain class of vehicles on the automotive market that has really not been seen. I mean, I am not aware of anything like that other than maybe the devaluing of the Ford Pinto, right? Because, you know, it was a series of events, right? It was Tesla, you know, ramping up production, not having dealer lots to put their cars on, too much production, not enough places to put them, cut the price, right? Aggressively starting a price war. I mean, Elon Musk is a madman. I mean, on some level, like no other CEO of any automotive business would dare do that. And in doing so, you know, provoked all of his fleet customers, which this was the second shoe to drop where Hertz starts to unload, right? And then that price war triggers cuts at Ford and cuts at Hyundai and cuts at Nissan, right? So across the board, the value of electric vehicles is going down. Then you've got another compounding factor, right? Which is the IRA passes the 25K used EV, right, incentive, and it has to be priced at 25,000 or less. So there's a no man's land for wholesale prices between 30,000 and 25,000, right? So those residual values just keep getting pushed down further and further. And, you know, sellers, leaseholders, right, large banks who are into them for more, they were in a negative equity position. They took the losses. We took huge losses. You know, we lost. I remember one day Ford cut the price $10,000 on a Ford F-150 Lightning, and we lost $10,000 on that day because now the used one is worth $10,000 less. It was scary, and for folks who have bought electric vehicles in the last couple of years, you're probably aware of it if you keep an eye on the value of your car, if you ever check it. But if you don't, and sometimes we get folks who come in and they bought an EV in 2021 and just like didn't think about it and took out a loan, and now the actual value is kind of it's a slap in the face, you know? I mean, I think it's really what it feels like on some level. And it's, you know, I think the core of it was the price war caught by the manufacturer. Now, on the other side of that, if it made way more people buy more electric vehicles and make them cheaper, and we've all lived to tell the tale, then isn't it the coolest thing? Isn't it amazing that this happened? Because what does that mean? That means right now you can get ridiculously awesome vehicles for way, way less money than a new one. I routinely save people maybe I'm rambling at this point, but the market is so exciting. Like, look, you see the Ioniq 5s. Steve, does it make you cry a little bit that I have Ioniq 5s that are that cheap that I'm selling used on my website?
Not in the least, because I'm going to drive mine until the wheels fall off. But that's going to happen.
But you take my point, right?
Yeah, I get exactly what you're talking about, because I'm excited that people get to go to a place like Green Wave, see the Ioniq 5, and not be put off by the $45,000, $50,000, $55,000 price tag. They get that latest, you know, very close to the latest EV tech. It still hasn't really been bested at that price point in terms of charging, certainly. And what you get for that road tripping quality in the vehicle, and you can get into that at a place like Green Wave. You know, I'm sure you can talk a little bit about the different models and whether they qualify for the 25,000 or not. What that piece comes into it, but certainly they're at a much more affordable level than when you're looking at a Hyundai for $55,000, and it's just out of reach right now. It's only got maybe 10,000-20,000 miles on the clock, and it's starting to come into that, you know, $25,000, $30,000, maybe $35,000 price point. That's not so hard a pill to swallow for that level of tech.
It's not, and it's really exciting because it's bringing more people into the market. And the other slice at the lower end of this, right? So think about right now, what if you have a 15-year-old car, an old Prius, Honda Fit, something like that? What do you want to get into? You buy used cars. You're not going to buy a new car, right? So you're gonna look at a Golf GTI, or you're gonna look at another Honda Fit of 2020, maybe a Toyota Prius, right? That's going to cost you, you know, relatively low miles, $20,000-$25,000, right? You're in the ballpark, right? Or you can get a Hyundai Kona, right, for like sub 20. The feds are going to throw $4,000 at you, right? So now you're paying 16. Your payments, like, you know, depending on whatever, it's under $300 a month, right? We do that routinely, and you don't have to put gas in it. So you're saving $100 a month there, and you don't have to do oil changes. So you're saving a couple $100. So for those people, right, it's really liberating, right? It's liberating them from the costs of maintaining a fossil fuel vehicle, right? Which is not designed to be efficient. It's not designed to be the most elegant way to transport people, not even the safest. Or it's not. And so saving people that money on their car. I truly believe that if you're in the market for a car right now and you're not seriously considering an electric vehicle, you have money to burn. So on both sides of that equation, it's a really exciting time, and it's thanks to the collapsing values of EVs over the last 18 months.
So I guess, I mean, you put the question to me, but we've all been new EV buyers, and not on at least on the first wave. Everyone here has bought a new EV at some point. So I want to hand it over to Walter and Eric, because they won't get to question you as often as I do. Then we'll move to the viewers a little bit to see what questions they have. But over to the co-hosts for a bit.
You want to start, Walter, or you want me to? Oh, okay. Yeah, so I mean, Jesse, one thing that I've noticed, and this is the hardest thing to communicate to people, is most new EVs on the road right now, or I shouldn't say most new EVs, most EVs on the road right now were eligible for a $7,500 tax credit. I think a lot of people don't realize that, and they don't count that in the depreciation, because nobody really paid $50,000 or $60,000 for their car. They paid $50,000 or $60,000 minus $7,500 at the federal level, and maybe minus $1,500, $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 at the state level, depending on what their state or local regional areas offered. I know Central Valley, California, they have an additional $2,000 on top of what the state offers and on top of what the federal government offered. So that depreciation is, I think, a little bit deceptive. But then at the same time, we do know that over time, battery prices have been coming down. They've been becoming more capable and costing less. And that's been the central price point as far as automakers are concerned. So this depreciating price, even on new EVs, is totally expected, that price war. I think we can all kind of anticipate that. And just so, like, you're kind of calling it out here, I just making sure that people understand that this is not something that we should be surprised by. But at the same time, just a little bit of my background that I maybe don't share as often as I should is my family never came from money. We never bought new cars. Usually they were sometimes unwinds, sometimes used, but spending more than $20,000 on a car was a completely foreign concept to anyone in my family, right? And so this used EV market is super important, because it aggravates me to no end when I hear a lot of EV advocates and EV, people pushing for buying new EVs saying, oh, it's only $45,000. And you say only. You have to realize that for so many people, $45,000 is hard sell. So having these used EVs coming in at under $30,000 and then having that additional tax credit for the used EV starting to apply, I think that's going to be huge. And I think it's just, there's going to be a breaking point where I think lower income buyers realize that they can get into an electric vehicle, and this current supply that we see, kind of a glut, is going to look so small once people realize that, because who's going to buy a gas car, right? Who's going to buy a $20,000 Corolla when you can buy a $20,000 Tesla Model 3? Like, it just doesn't make sense. So, but yeah, so I not so much a question, but like I maybe in getting into that from your perspective as a used car dealership, is this the time for you to expand your inventory, right? Like, is this the time when you say, okay, look, there's a glut on the market, but this is the time for me to kind of fill my coffers with used cars that I know that I'm going to be able to turn around and sell in January. So.
Awesome question, Eric. And you hit on so many great points. I think I was absolutely missed the tax credits that came back for Tesla and for GM, right? That contributed to and the state credits, which is fabulous. And I love that. So yeah, exactly. And on the flip side of that, and this is for those of you who might not qualify for the tax credit, your vehicle depreciates by the amount of the tax credit when it is sold, because it is only eligible for that credit once, whether or not you are able to claim that credit on that vehicle, right? So that's an important thing to keep in mind. Eric, I ask, I look at the market, right, every day, and absolutely, can I buy 23s for less than I can buy 22s right now? Yes, right? But it's coming close. And my biggest problem is the cost of money, right? Interest rates being so high, and this is part of, right, this is what's helped us get through inflation, right? But interest rates being so high, my cost of inventory is very high. And I actually thought, so I kind of did that a little bit, like we were screaming in the summer, we were going great. And so I bought 10 Konas, right? And we had been running about 4 or 5 Konas a month. I didn't want to have to buy 5 every month. So I bought 10 Konas because, like, hey, it's summertime. We're killing Konas. And I think I still have 7 on my lot, right? And all of them on my lot are worth less than they were when they started. So that, and meanwhile, small business, right? We don't have access to great capital. Our lines of credit cost us about 15%, right? So, we have, you look at our website, we got $1 million worth of inventory. It's costing us 15%, and plus fees and this and that. So someday when Green Wave is big, and if somebody, and honestly, I don't want to say this too loud, because a car dealership that does have access to better capital and a solid way of connecting to clients and moving these vehicles could absolutely take advantage of this right now. Cox Automotive just reported today, and for those of you who don't know, Cox Automotive is like the largest corporation in the automotive sector. They control Kelley Blue Book and a million other businesses, especially that dealers work with. But Cox Automotive just reported today, for the first time, used EV prices ticked up 0.1% month over month. Now that's after about 18 months of average 14 to 16% declines. So it is stabilizing. But if you look at Recurrent's study on this, recurrentauto.com just did a study showing these prices coalescing right at around 20K. What I'm most excited about is the Subaru Solterra and the BZ4X, aka the Busy Forks, right? The 2023s fall into that range. And I'll tell you why. People love their Toyotas and they love their Subarus, and they want to go EV, but they're only going to buy the Toyota or they're only going to buy the Subaru. And they heard that it sucks, so they're not going to spend 50 grand. But would they spend 21? It's an awesome car for 21, right? So I think there are plays to be made right now on different models, and I just picked up a Nissan Aria, a newer car. I didn't want to touch them when they were new because I got inside reports they were not performing well. So I waited, and they just dropped. They dropped big last year. I don't know if you covered that, Steve. $7,000, right? And so I just got a Platinum, right, that I'm going to be offering in the low 30s, Platinum Plus. So there are certain models that are hitting that sweet spot of that $20,000 depreciation on the wholesale market, and you just have to go to greenwaveev.com to see all the exciting new stuff that I'm making bets on.
Bring that up briefly. I wanted to use that segue because you hit the perfect model for it. Just to shout out David Say and Andrew Lambrecht, who have transitioned this YouTube channel, The Current Review, into a podcast that's happening weekly, I believe. David is in your neck of the woods, Jesse, I think a bit up the coast in Maine. He's co-founder of Chargely, and Andrew Lambrecht Yeah, I'm trying to remember his
Yes,
background.
I know David. Yes.
Yeah, you know David, I think. But in any case, they mentioned, the link here is that they mentioned they have a section at the end of the podcast called Best EV Deal, and they mentioned the Nissan Harrier not in a new sale context, but in a used EV context, for exactly the reason you mentioned. Amazing, beautiful EV, lots of value, except that at that $50,000 price point, bit too rich for most people's blood given what else is on the market. But get that down to the 20s, much, a lot of EV for much more kind of palatable deals. So worth going to check that podcast out, but also for that kind of best model that they're talking about. But I want to give Walter a chance here to ask his piece as well, and then we'll move to the comments from folks in the chat.
Jesse, thank you so much for joining the live stream. The question I had was on the upstream source for used EV, which could be individual owners, but not uncommonly fleets. And there's a bit of unclear information coming across. Of course, the Hertz sell-off was highly publicized as a result of the amortization not making sense anymore, so they decided to just walk away from a large chunk of their inventory of electric vehicles and got them off the books as a result of what you very eloquently described as the price war. But there was an article from Clean Technica, Steve Hanley, who says that now there's a 9% cost savings for fleet operators going EV, which includes the component of depreciation. Most of the cost savings come from fuel savings. So that means fleet operators, if this is to be believed, have a 9% cost savings by running an electric fleet versus an internal combustion fleet. Now, the data that I was looking at it quite closely, and the data seems to be solid. And I'm just kind of curious, is the sell-off from fleet operators, and you might not have a definitive answer, but I would imagine that you'd have a better feel for this than others, since you're the recipient of many vehicles that used to be in fleets. Is the sell-off from fleet operators still occurring by your estimation, or have fleet operators started to gravitate towards electrification and what you'd be seeing instead of like mass sell-offs from Hertz, more like just normal refreshing of inventory, as a fleet would go through on a 2-year cycle or whatever?
Yeah. No, it's great. It's a great question, Walter, and it touches on a lot for me, because before I started Greenwave Electric Vehicles, I was in mobility vehicles, wheelchair accessible vehicles, for about 12 years, and I worked in sales for large fleets, right? So when you say fleets, right, we served all different types of fleets, and so we could talk about Hertz and Avis and rental enterprise, right? But I think there are other pockets of fleet and commercial that are worth kind of getting into. But you make a really interesting point around the 9% savings on fleets under for running EVs versus internal combustion engine cars, including the depreciation. So I would imagine without the depreciation, it's significantly higher savings.
Yes.
Because we don't do that analysis for fleets too much at Greenwave. We're mostly B2C, right? But we do it for individuals, and we find that they're going to save, usually anywhere from $150 to $300 plus per month on fuel and maintenance, right?
Real money, which is real money back into the household budget.
Yes, thank you, Walter. You're absolutely right. We're at a little over $400,000 year to date. We track that. That's one of our mission metrics at Greenwave. We track 3 things, right, that tell us whether or how successful we're being, right? One is the amount of kilograms of CO2 that we reduce people's carbon footprint. Now, I will admit, it's not a scientific number. We ask them how many miles per year they drive. We divide it by the amount of miles per gallon they're getting on their car, and we multiply it by 8.887 kilograms of CO2, right? And we measure it in how much money we put back into their budget, right? And then we we measure how many trees we plant, because we plant 100 trees in everyone's name when they buy a vehicle from Green Wave Electric Vehicles, and we've planted just over 30,000 trees so far this year. So that's exciting. But to the fleet point of view, and I'm sorry I went off on a little bit of a tangent, but I think Hertz is still offloading EVs. Avis is still offloading EVs. And we're talking about 2023 Volvo C40s. We're talking about 2023 EV6s. So the same time that they were getting rid of these Teslas or starting to defleet, I think it had as much to do with the relationship with Tesla, the corporation, that defleeting. I don't think they're going to completely be getting out of electric vehicles. At least I have seen no indication. Now, it was a torrent coming from the spigot. I was getting emails from Hertz 4 times a week with lists 1,000 Teslas long, right? And now I can go into their portal, right? I can sort, I can go, and if I don't see pictures, I ain't buying it, right? But if they've got 24 pictures there for me and it looks all good, it's got a condition report from a third party, there's all that. It has a, I might put it in I'll tell you, I'll take an enterprise fleet car. And it's great to be tapped into enterprise because they have 2 divisions. They have their rental division, but then they also have their corporate fleet division. And that's one of the areas that I'm starting to really see a lot more cars come out. Like I got 4 Ioniq 5s earlier this year. They were all one owner commercial off lease. Some company decided they wanted 4 Ioniq 5s for their pool, right? And so those types of things, and there are companies out there like Merchants. I got to give a shout out to Merchants Fleet. They also specialize in, and when they flip your fleet to electric, they also help you figure out the whole charging infrastructure, right, and set that all up, and wind the financing in for all those pieces. So and to a certain extent, there's a boost for some of these companies who own the real estate, generate the solar, that are charging the fleets, right? So there's a lot of avenues and opportunities. And Walter, I think that it's exciting to see non-rental fleets start to defleet some of these cars because it means, I think, broader adoption overall. And then you get the corporate fleet, second owner discount on a car that was owned by a C-suite executive for some pharmaceutical company in Connecticut,
Yeah, you're ideally placed for all those tri-state cast-offs, right? You can get some premium EVs for good sales. Let me crank through the comments here. First of all, I'll do our usual little soiree of saying hello to folks, and then we'll get to a few other questions that were asked for you, Jesse. So first of all, EV champion of Bucksport, Maine, and wider New England, I think, Stevenson Peter Jr. We've had a couple of pieces of content with Steven and many more in raw footage that I need to edit. But hey, Jesse.
What's up, hey, I got to put in a plug. I got to say, if you're in Bucksport, Maine, and you're watching this, vote for Stephen St. Peter for town council. I approve him. Nobody is going to do a better job on the town council than Stephen St. Peter.
Endorsement.
If anyone can bring DC fast charging to Bucksport, it's Stephen St.
Peter. That's true.
We have Ron B. Hello from San Jose, California, with his Taycan. We also have Patrick, who I believe this question was answered by Walter in the comments, but can the Volvo charge at Tesla parking in only one spot?
Yeah, and I was trying to type it, so I didn't fully answer the question. But yes, once the supercharger access is granted, the Volvo XC40 Recharge will have the charge port door in the correct spot using only one charging spot.
Thank you. Delightfully succinct, and appreciate you monitoring in the comments while I couldn't. Auction Wheels, long-time listener from Atlanta with 2 bolts and a very early Ioniq 5 with 165,000 miles. Now my 80,000 miles feels positively pedestrian. Thanks for that. But congratulations on so many miles and proving they can go the distance. Bill B, let's see, real problem is there's no demand for used EVs, not even cars like the Porsche Taycan. I feel like we'll be coming on to that very soon. And then we have, let's see, Robert Brigham, welcome from California. I'm assuming, having gotten $4,200 for his Bolt in 2017. That would have been new because that was the first model year of the Bolt, as Eric well knows. Let's see, anything else? I think we've said hello to everyone, so let's run through some of the viewer questions there. So we started off with Stephen, and he asks Jesse, what were the challenges of getting a dealership off the ground? How long do you have? But if you maybe want to pick your top one.
Yeah, I'll say this. When I first started doing it, one of my buddies said to me, "You're starting a car dealership like from the ground up? Like, I've never heard of anybody do that." And I said, "That's because it's really, really hard. I mean, you have to build it from we have to have software systems and accounting systems, and you have to get licenses and certifications and make it all talk to each other and work. And then you have to get loans to buy these cars, unless you got like $1 million and you want to buy $1 million worth of used cars and try to sell them for $1,100,000. I mean, it's hard. It's really hard the challenges were many. I think the great thing though is the people who have come out and supported this movement, right? That's really, I think, most of our customers have, and Steven's a leader in this movement here in our community. You guys are all leaders. I mean, it's people who would take a chance on Green Wave. Because we're not like a car dealership. We didn't even have a service location, right? We had a service partner and a service plan, and we understood EVs more than every other dealership around. But people still had to take a chance on us to a certain extent. So I think taking a chance on ourselves, having people to take a chance with us, and just making it through the hard times and the months in and the months out, we're still there where you work really, really hard and you still lose a bunch of money. So
fair to say you've never been bored in your 2 years of existence.
No,
sure.
No, not bored. Not bored. Sleep deprived, but not bored.
Working hard to move it forward for sure. So we also had Leonard in the comments, who's out in Oklahoma. Shares a story of paying $50,000 for his Model 3 new, big stretch at the time, that he does not plan to repeat. Thinks he is buying used from now on to get closer to that $20,000 price point.
Yeah, I gotta say, I mean, I have to carry vehicles that meet the general market demand, and the general market demand, at least in my area, is vehicles with lower miles. But am I really honestly afraid of a Model 3 with 150,000 miles? No, I'm not. I mean, you're going to have suspension component issues, but you are on any car at that level, right? But the amount of money that you could save, the battery, the drive unit, even went out of warranty. And there are warranties you can buy that are very affordable. We could talk more about that if that's something you want to get into. But I think people... because they've never been in one of these cars, they think, oh, well, nothing lasts as long as a Prius. The Tacomas, they'll go 300,000 miles, right? It's like I truly believe that 20 years from now, we're going to be astonished, especially with the falling battery prices, right? Which you brought up, Eric and Walter, you guys have talked about. I mean, I tell people 5 years ago, batteries were like $500 a kilowatt hour. Right. And today it's about $200 a kilowatt hour. And by the time this car, which will not rust because it's mostly made of aluminum, and the battery's going to degrade way slower than anybody thought it was. Right. By the time this needs a new battery, you're going to be able to buy a new battery for pennies on what we're looking at today. And no, in my opinion, it's not going to be a solid state battery that's going to give you 900 miles of range, right? I mean, maybe that'd be cool, right? But that's not happening soon. It's really not. It's what Toyota and Subaru are telling everybody to keep them from buying an EV now, because their EV sucks, right? I mean, so
themselves out of busy fork sales, though.
Yeah. So Yeah.
So Leonard also asked, as a dealer, how do you handle eligibility on the tax credit? Have you had any weird issues with the IRS?
Yeah, it's a great question. Eligibility is an attestation, right? That's all it is in the process. There's a prescribed process by the IRS. You have to be registered, licensed, trained on how to do it, et cetera, et cetera. And I have a responsibility for it. I attest under penalty of perjury multiple times a day that this vehicle is under 25K and it's at least 2 years old, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And the taxpayer does that too. They attest that they are not a dependent. They don't think that they make over 150K, married, filing jointly, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, all the requirements under penalty of perjury. And if they go over the amount, then they're going to have to pay the $4,000 back, right? So it's really just a handshake. And it's built on this is part of the reason that the IRA made it part of, you had to buy it from a dealer. You couldn't just buy it from someone else, is because it's my business license. It's my federal employer ID number on every single one of these. It's my livelihood. And don't get me wrong, used car dealerships have a terrible reputation for shady people, right? But if you want to be sure that you're shopping at a used car dealership that's not shady, go to one that's actually taking the tax credit at point of sale, right? Because there's a process you have to go through, and it's legit. So the answer is you can say whatever you want and get the tax credit, but the feds are going to find you if you don't really qualify. They are. So
it's valuable points, and I think it's worth. It kind of brings us into one of the questions I had, and I think was echoed in the comments there about how does a dealership help my pre-owned purchase? I mean, obviously we've had folks talk about, that we had Darren on last time who bought his Tesla used from a GM dealership of all places, but as a dedicated plug-in hybrid and battery electric vehicle dealership, what are you bringing to the table that these traditional dealerships and that kind of unfortunate stereotype that you referenced there for used car dealers would not bring?
Yeah, totally. Well, I think a lot of people, the first wave of people who bought EVs, and I'm kind of one of them, just knew what you wanted, did the research, went out and bought it, right? I mean, for Tesla owners, literally, you ordered it online, and if you're in New Hampshire, you drove to New Jersey to pick it up and see it for the first time after you'd already paid for it, because Tesla doesn't have a dealership anyway. So they took the whole thing out. Now, for this next generation of buyers, right, they want to go EV. I mean, 50%, it's pretty consistent. 50% of the American population of drivers say that their next car is going to be an electric vehicle, right? But when they come into GreenWave, so many of them have so much anxiety about making the switch. I mean, that's the only way to describe it. And whether it's anxiety that's, they're like, I'm really anxious about making the switch, or they're standoffish, or, all these things. I mean, look, coming into a car dealership is stressful anyway, right? I mean, I know I've been in those types of car dealerships. It's meant to be disempowering and stressful and take as much money from you and time from you as you can, right? Well, the way it should be, and it needs to be for this next wave of people who's adopting EVs, you need a welcoming place. You need a place where you can have your questions answered, right? You need a place where you can be empowered to make the decision about, your transportation and your carbon footprint, right? To reduce your cost of living and get a more cool car than you've been driving. You need to be empowered to get that. And so when they come to GreenWave, we ask them questions about their lifestyle. How much do they drive every day? What's their commute? What are they driving? How much money are they spending now, right? We do that analysis for them and give them what we call a transportation impact report. Shows them how much they're going to reduce their transportation costs based on AAA's numbers on cost per mile basis, and how much they're going to reduce their carbon footprint. We give that with them, right? So that they can compare that to their payment, right? We also take them through, we use PlugShare and we use a better route planner, right? To show people where the chargers are, and we get them hooked up with the different apps and kind of get to, we dispel the paradigm that they have where you're supposed to drive as far as you can and then you're almost out of battery and then you charge up again. And it's like, that's not the best way to do it. So we show them a better route planner, and then we help them like choose between a EV6 or a Chevy Bolt. We say, okay, so you go to visit your kids in North Carolina. They live in Raleigh, Durham. You're going from New Hampshire. You do that twice a year. This is how long it's going to take in a Bolt. This is how long it's going to take in an Ioniq 5. So those types of like really practical things, right, are the things that matter to people. We help them figure out how to get home charging set up and how much that's going to cost, right? How that's going to wrap into the whole equation. And you know, we give them a lot of fun rides in some wicked awesome cars. I mean, like, it's like we teach them how to whip around. Like, I was at the hockey rink the other day, and some lady said, "Oh, I could never buy an electric car. They just drive like this. Like, you're always like going like back and forth." And I'm like, somebody stuck her in an EV and didn't tell her about regenerative braking, right? So like, she just thinks that's how they drive, right? Whereas we give people, like, we also give them autopilot and full self-driving lessons in the cars, the Teslas that have those, right? Teaching them about the adaptive driver systems, you know, driver assistance, because some people do come in and they explicitly want to buy a car with these advanced driver assistance features because they're getting older and it's safer to drive that way. So we help guide them to the cars that are there. And then I think finally, you know, our base of knowledge, we make every car right. We get them in, we have a whole, we call it Green Wave certified. It's similar to like what you would see at a CPO program at a dealership. We do it with East Coast Automotive, who's a great partner with us. I tell people, you know, at this point, nobody's seen more electric vehicles in the state of New Hampshire from a shop standpoint, because they've seen over 500 come and go, right? So we bring that to the equation. Then we get them financing, right? Extended warranties. You know, there's a lot that we can bring. I mean, you can go and buy a car on the internet on Car Gurus. Careful. Careful.
Well, it's valuable, and you kind of hit on. That's why I put this question up from Patrick, because it kind of touched on that point that you're right next to your shop there that you use, and he does ask what is the equivalent of taking a used ICE car to a mechanic with EVs? Is there an equivalent to make people feel comfortable? And that after service piece, as we'll get onto if we don't run up against time here, is one of the main questions, along with the battery and the other pieces of aftercare that people ask about. Maybe we can talk about that a little bit and pass over to Walter and Eric for any kind of specific questions on, you know, maintaining a used EV after its kind of, you know, purchase and a little bit into its life.
Totally. No, do you want me to hit this one really quick?
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, we're actually working on a video for this for Green Wave, so I'm really excited that you've got that. But the truth is, maintenance, I mean, tires. I've done 60,000 miles in my Mach-E. Tires and windshield wiper fluid. I have the same brakes and pads. I think the pads are going to pass again, right? I think my windshield wipers are still the same blades. I don't think I've switched out the blades. 60,000 miles, right? I think they'll go for a lot longer. So it's like tires and state inspection, but that's not to say that there aren't other things to do, right? Like, I mean, look, the battery cooling system is a closed system. It's not like a radiator, so you don't need it flushed, right? The brakes should be a closed system as well. I mean, unless you spring a leak in something like this, right? Your suspension components are going to need work over time, right? Your control arms wear out, your bushings wear out. Tesla, control arm bushings, the pillow bush, I mean, it's insane. Every single one that comes in, we make them right, but it's expensive, right? So I think that's, you know, you have to find a shop that's willing and able to do that stuff. But I think as these vehicles proliferate, it's going to make more and more sense for these folks to do this. We are next to a shop that was a BMW, Audi, Porsche shop, and they're way ahead of the curve on electrification. I mean, think about the i3, right? So I think, you know, the reality is you don't need a lot of this maintenance, and an air conditioner is an air conditioner, right? You can get that fixed anywhere. That's a major failure point on cars. And anything more serious than that, you got to go to a dealer because they're going to have special access to parts, you know? So having a franchise dealer is important. But what's the equivalent for maintenance? just your tires, bro.
Got your consumables, maybe the 12-volt. If you're in an Ioniq 5, you might want to keep
Thank
an eye
you.
on. It's,
Yes.
yeah, a few pieces. But I think that's, again, just talks back to the benefit of potentially using a dealership like yourself, because you're going to naturally, by networking and the need to service so many vehicles, even if it's just to give them the one server, you're going to need to go to a shop that is experienced with electric vehicles, hybrid systems. We're blessed with quite a few in the Northeast here, specifically in New England. But if you're in the middle of the country and other places, and maybe fewer and further between. So knowing that your dealership has those relationships and can point you in the right direction is just another reason to kind of go through the dealership in the first place, I think. But I want to hand it over to Eric quick, because he will probably have plenty of questions. He does his own repairs, but
I was going to say you forgot the cabin air filter. That's the big one. Talk about maintenance. But I had a few other questions, but trying to keep it germane to just this point right now. How much do you lean into the? I'll just say it, superior EV warranty coverage as part of the sales pitch? Because we've talked about this before, but just to get these credits, these alternative vehicle credits, those batteries and the electronic powertrain have to be warranted by the manufacturer for 8 years, 100,000 miles, and that has to at least provide some sort of assurance, I'm guessing, when you're talking to customers.
Oh, it's a great point, Eric. And I actually even tell people, so when I was in the wheelchair van business and we were in automotive manufacturing, one of the things I learned is that most manufacturers warranty something only half of what they test it to, right? So that's where, the warranties are great. Especially Hyundai and Kia, 5 years, 60,000, right? But Polestar, Volvo, 4 years, 50, Audi, Volkswagen, 4 years, 48,000. I mean, exceptional warranties. Tesla, right? 120, Rivian, 175,000 miles of warranty, right? I think they've overbuilt these battery management systems. I think these things are going to last a really, really long time. And that's what I tell people. I'm like, if you want a car that's going to last, you've got a lot of people who have 2008 Priuses come into Greenwave, 2007 Honda Fits. And they're like, I love to keep my car forever. I'm like, you want a car who's going to challenge you to a staring contest, right? Get yourself a Hyundai Kona.
And Walter, I want to give you an opportunity as well. We'll discuss if we're going later or not.
That's hilarious. A car that will not blink. So I've got a Volvo XC40 Recharge 2022 level 2 plus trim that was assembled in Ghent, Belgium, I believe. I forgot how it's pronounced. Imported into the East Coast, and it was one of the few cars that was delivered that year, which we were able to get our hands on. It's my daily driver. Getting ready to do a 3-year review, and we've had $0 in maintenance. I did put new tires on it. I don't consider that part of maintenance. As Steve said, that was consumable. We had the air filter replaced as a courtesy from the dealer as a result of one of the routine checks that were all comped because there was really nothing to do. And I do have a couple of jugs of windshield washer fluid in my garage, which I occasionally top off the reservoirs with. But that's about it. And so my opinion is electric vehicles have politics around people's thoughts about them. And electric vehicles have FUD. There's also FUD about electric vehicles because there are some very powerful interest groups that are not a big fan of EVs taking off. And so there is that circulating around. My personal opinion, though, if you put an electric vehicle in the average American household, what you're doing is you're improving the quality of life for that family. And so all things aside, what you're doing by focusing exclusively on EVs, I consider to be very noble because there's a lot of disinformation out there. And when you just put an electric vehicle in a house and walk away and, let the people have what was called by one of our previous guests, a light switch moment, it takes care of itself. It's a solution for a problem that everyone struggles with, which is just finding ability to maintain continuity of transportation in a mobile society. And so anyway, I don't know if your view is similar as far as the civic function that you're providing your customers by introducing them to you said 90% of your customers are first-time EV buyers. So in my opinion, if I could dedicate my life to something as noble as improving the lives of my customers, it's worthwhile anyway.
Yeah. Well, Walter, thank you, man. It's really touching, and I'm honored by your words. It's been my path. I mean, when I got out of college, I worked in services for people with developmental disabilities, and I did that for 12 years, mostly transportation services. And then, as I said, I transitioned into the wheelchair van industry, mostly because I started a family and I couldn't support them on the salary of a social worker. But I've maintained my connection to that through I serve on the state coordinating council for community transportation here in New Hampshire, which is a DOT program that brings together all the regional community action programs and the planning commissions and the departments of transportation and the Medicaid service providers and the transportation brokers, brings them all together, as well as stakeholders, people with disabilities, seniors in our community who need transportation, to figure out how to give them better access, because it's a big focus of the federal government right now on the public health side is what we call social determinants of health, right? It's not like just germs make people sick, right? Lack of ability to get to the doctor when you need regular care is making people sicker, right? And isolation is a social determinant of health. People who are more isolated are less likely to be healthy, right? And people who don't have access to transportation can't access their community, can't get good healthy food, can't get job, education, and so transportation is at this point. Transportation is a requirement to live a quality of life in the community. And the fact that it is so expensive and people feel so locked in to a product that is literally killing our planet, right? And making our winters go away and causing all kinds of challenges, that it's also costing people more money than they need to be spending, is, I think, one of the great ironies that history will look back and say, wow, look at the way they had them fooled, right? But the beautiful thing is that we've got enough momentum right now, right? Because it was a science. 10 years ago, owning an EV was a science project. 10 tiny years ago. Now it's the best choice for every family in almost every community in the United States. Right. And there's it's happening. It's the resources are here. I mean, just wait until 2027 when all the people who got their first EV with the tax credit and now are basically paid off. So they owe like $2,000 on this 2017 Chevy Bolt. Right. And it's worth $7,000. Right. So they get $5,000 plus another tax credit. Now they get a 2023 Chevy Bolt for less than their other payment. And somebody gets a Chevy Bolt for $9,000. I mean, it's here. It's already happening on that cycle. And it is a social justice thing. You're absolutely right. It's an American community values, giving power back to the people in our communities. I think absolutely. And it's great to be on that journey with you guys.
So, Jesse, I want to make sure I'm respectful of your time, at least ask, because we always go over time. I was aiming for roughly an hour. If you've got 10, 15 minutes, we'd love to keep going, but
I've got time. Yeah, let's I got a couple more questions in me. Thank you so much. This is great. I really enjoyed this. Thank you.
We always go late, so it's just continuing the trend of nobly trying to come in on time and failing miserably. But that does open up the path for Eric to ask, and then I'll go back with the comments quick.
Yeah. So one question I did want to ask is, because this came up when should have come up with our other discussion about used EVs, is the cost of like you mentioned, the cost of money, but the cost of a loan for used cars tends to be much higher than the cost of a loan for a new car. The loans for new cars tend to be subsidized. So I did want to ask you how much of a challenge that was, and do you recommend, like, I know a lot of times customers will sometimes, if they have a credit union, maybe take a personal loan or get a loan from their bank to cut them a check rather than finance at a higher rate if it's going to come to a loan. So basically, from your perspective, as a used EV dealership, right, how much of a challenge is that sort of extra cost of lending money? And then what is your recommendation for customers coming into you in terms of, cash in hand, down payment, borrowing through you, or if possible, having, like I said, a personal loan or check from a bank, and then just being able to negotiate with you directly once they get to the dealership?
That's awesome, Eric. It's a great question. So, a little bit about our evolution will tell you a little bit more about like the small independent dealers and what they have access to for credit for their customers. When we first started, all I could get access to, the only lender that would sign me up was Westlake, who's they call themselves a full spectrum prime, but it is kind of subprime. Their rates are a little bit higher, right? They're the only ones who would sign us up because they'll sign anybody with a dealer license and a banking license up. But we're right up the street from Service Credit Union, which is a huge national credit union, and their headquarters is in New Hampshire. And apparently their CEO was driving by me one day and came by our lot and said, to his head of auto lending, interview that guy, see if he wants to do loans with us. And so through that kind of stroke of luck, I got access at a very early stage to credit union lending. And that's I think the best way that a lot of dealers, at least around us, do their financing. Because with credit union lending, you get access to the really the lowest rates that are out there. And a lot of the franchise dealers use the credit unions as well, especially for their used car sales, right? The subsidized, 0%, 1.99, those are fabulous, right? They're also in lieu of cash, discounts. So there is some type of trade-off there. And leasing's a whole other ball of wax we probably don't want to touch. But when you're coming to a dealership, you absolutely should shop rates. Having a relationship with a good credit union in your community is probably good, financially smart anyway. So if you've got a little bit of extra money, like, make a relationship with a local credit union. I love community. I'm a big small business community person, right? So, like, get to know your local banker, because then when you go to a dealership, you'll be able to bounce that off of them. Now, we have access to a special local small credit union that has actually mission-based loans for EVs. They give rate discounts if you're buying an EV. And so I'm at 5.05% for 66 months, 4.5% for a short term of 30 months, 4.5%. The new car stores around me on non-promotional leases, they're at 7-8%.
Yeah. So, okay.
It's crazy. It's crazy. So I think, and that's what I actually think we should get rate discounts, not only for the mission perspective, right? But these cars are less risky. I do believe that, right? They're going to last longer. A lot of all the credit unions, they won't lend on anything over 120,000 miles because it's more risky. Then it's subprime, and they don't do subprime, right? But I think that's going to expand. One of the things that we've gotten the credit unions to do is now they can finance the charger into it, the home charger installation, which is anywhere from $2,000 to, I actually worked with someone and they had to pay some of it in cash, but they needed a whole service upgrade to their home from 100 amp to 200 amp service, right? Just that is like $4,000 in our market. And that plus the charger installation, we were able to finance into the arrangement a significant portion of that. So I think that there are some it's a chance to use the purchase of a car to also upgrade your entire infrastructure of your home, right? So there are some unique opportunities being leveraged in here, just like solar installers sometimes do service upgrades and EV charger installs. I think it's that holistic approach that's really becoming transformative. and spreading the word more, to your point, Walter and Steve and Eric, what you're doing for the community. The more people hear about how awesome this is, the more it seems accessible to them. And financially, the picture's getting better and better every day.
So, I mean, on that financial side again, so kind of getting into a little bit the other side of EVs where there are costs involved. Robert Brigham had asked, do increased insurance costs, and there's a question mark next to increase, because I think we did touch on that in the previous episode, and we couldn't put any fingers on insurance costs increasing for us, but does that potentially, and in the experience you've had, cut into the advantages of the cost savings of going electric?
It's a great question, and I see people all the time. They come into my dealership, they have to call their insurance to add it on, right? And most of the time, they're pleasantly surprised. It's the same or less, right? The times where people are like, "What?" is when it's like a 25-year-old Army reservist who's buying a Tesla Model 3 Performance, right? I mean, like, there you go, which is awesome, right? But other than that, no, the insurance is not higher in what I've seen yet. I mean, Tesla, yes, it's higher on Teslas because their components are more expensive to fix. It's a luxury brand. I mean, insurance is going to be higher on an Audi, but if you're an Audi owner, if you're buying an Audi, used Audi at Greenwave, you know that your insurance is that. So it's not going to change significantly just because of the internal combustion engine versus, battery electric vehicle powertrain. At least I haven't seen it.
That seems to be consistent across. We all went through it last week on the stream, and nobody could. I hear it a lot, and I can only ever attest to my experience, because we don't really have that conversation that often. But it does seem to be, whenever I ask the question, most people who have gone through the process of buying an EV or insuring an EV, non-plus, they don't really. It doesn't register as an extra cost. So that one, I think we can, for the most part, bat out as it's not going to. Kind of like the upgrade. Maybe you do have to upgrade your home in some instances, and that is an issue. But it's never going to be like it's not an instant cost that suddenly offsets $2,000, $3,000, and that's it. For most people, they have some way to charge, whether it's just an outlet for a little while, or at work, or using one of these existing sockets that you have already with the dryer, or the some kind of range cooker. All that seems to be something that is navigable, instead of, as the naysayers, and to Walter's point, misinformation would have you believe you have to immediately upgrade your entire electrical arrangement in the house before you can even consider going electric.
Right. I mean, as you're talking, I'm thinking about, we have had a couple of insurance losses, and I've heard about some of these folks. I mean, look, if you have a road hazard that punctures your battery, it's exceedingly rare, but when it happens, that's a huge loss, right? So I just don't know how much that's actually happening and how much it's being covered by insurance, but I could see that as, at some point, as adoption gets that much bigger, right? Because, road hazards happen. Just they kill tires, maybe they kill the bottom. So I don't know. I think you're right on with the charging. Probably move on from the insurance thing.
Yeah, I did kind of want to. I just want to make sure we follow it with Robert, because he was obviously asking based on his scenario, and his finding his AAA insurance went to $1,900 a year. That's a Bolt. Eric, any thoughts on that? May just be his scenario, or
yeah, maybe. I never really noticed any significant difference with the Bolt. Yeah, I think I added it to my insurance with a Chevy Volt, and my insurance basically doubled. But I mean, that's two Chevy cars, right? Like, so. But yeah, I can't speak to his rates specifically, but I know mine for multiple vehicles is less than that. So, but
yeah. I saw my insurance go down when I went from my 2018 Ford Fusion hybrid to my Ford Mustang Mach-E, and that was because the Mustang Mach-E had they have a checklist of Does it have automatic emergency braking? Yes. Does it have blind spot alert? Yes. Does it have lane keeping? Yes. Does it have driver attention warning? Yes. Does it have vehicle tracking? Yes. Like you check down everything, and a lot of these EVs have literally everything. And really, what's the most expensive thing to insure? It's not the vehicle, it's the people. It's the medical payments, right? So if EVs are actually, which I believe they are, you've probably heard the maybe dubious numbers from Tesla about their autopilot software, right? Which we can get more into, but creating way fewer accidents. Then insurance rates should go down as EV adoption goes up, right? Are you guys aware of that? Tesla publishes those stats every year about how many accidents happen per mile in a Tesla using autopilot, right? And so the National Transportation Safety Board says there's approximately one accident for every 600,000 miles traveled on American roads. Tesla using autopilot software, and again, you could say this is dubious because when you're using autopilot, it's on the highway where fewer accidents happen, et cetera, but that's one accident for every 7 million miles traveled. So it's significantly better. I think even if that number is not, accurate or apples for apples, I think these driver assistance systems in these EVs, in addition to the low center of gravity, virtual inability to flip these cars over, right, which is a disproportionate amount of fatal collisions or rollover crashes, you're gonna see, I think, a collective reduction of insurance. Walter, another boon for the American family coming from EV technology, really saving us from unsafe at any speed gas cars.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think my insurance was higher on my Mitsubishi Lancer Evolution GSR, but that might be for different reasons. So, yeah.
My insurance definitely went up from the bulk because I was traveling on the New York subway. So it went from $0 to whatever it was after that. I'm sure I was safer in my Bolt than on the subway. So let's really quickly crank through. I had seen something in my research for this topic on Consumer Reports, and interesting to look at some mainstream kind of points on the used EV market as they gave some guidance. So I wanted to get everyone's thoughts on this before we finish up. So the first piece was used EV benefits, and they obviously kind of make these short and snappy. Have average cost drops, less scheduled maintenance, which we covered, more features than gas hybrid cars, which was an interesting one that Jesse just touched upon, and how that moves into the safety side, and then long-lasting batteries covered by warranty, which is all good stuff. No quibbles there, really. Then they move to the downsides, less reliable than gas or hybrid, which someone needs to copy editor for that, but nonetheless, I'm not sure if that's what we would say. More chance for new tech to go wrong. I think I would agree with that as a first-year IONIQ 5 owner. Expensive replacement batteries and may charge slower. Not really sure what they were going for there. And then battery health check, which again, some interesting kind of mainstream advice here. Compare range readout to EPA estimate. Wouldn't go with that. Ask for photo of dashboard showing range estimate. Disastrous idea. Third-party tools, Recurrent Auto, agree totally, and same with the health report. So, we could touch on any of those that we want to, but, initially, just from the advice on going by the GOM for your range estimate and EPA measures, I can give you sell my IONIQ 5 with 350 miles of range on a nice sunny day downhill, or even show you it's a perpetual motion machine if they start on the top of Mount Washington. But some stuff in there maybe shows the gap between why you would want to go to somewhere like Greenwave to get someone who knows the cars inside out, compared to the kind of Consumer Reports. I'm sure do a great job on many things, but there are some issues I think we could take with that kind of guidance, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I actually, you sent me those slides in advance of this, and I appreciate that. I do want to get to them, but I have to comment on Consumer Reports a little bit. Oh, you're not going to see this. So this is the Consumer Reports on EVs, their latest reporting on EVs. And it's really confusing because they rated the EV6 way more reliable than the IONIQ 5. but they're the same platform. It's the same, like what's more reliable, less reliable? Are you talking about the infotainment, like the switches on the dashboard are more reliable?
I was going to mention that, where they're talking about hybrids. Yeah, I think Consumer Reports mixes up things that are defects and things that are what I would call mission critical to the car. That's why there's a report that came out of the UK that gas cars are 60% more likely to break down than an EV of a similar mileage and age. So when it comes to actual things that keep the car running, it's not even close. Hybrids and gas cars are far less reliable than EVs. Now, did your infotainment system glitch? Maybe. That's maybe more likely in an EV, but that's not going to strand you on the side of the road. So I think Consumer Reports is being really disingenuous with that.
No, absolutely, Eric. And that's a tough conversation for a lot of people at Greenwave, right? Because a lot of people come in, there's, I don't want to overstate the case too much, but there's two books that they read consistently, and one's the good book, and the other one is Consumer Reports when they need to buy something expensive, right? And so I think that these conversations are tough, but the reality is, with the automotive journalism in general, right? They don't own EVs, right? And they don't get paid to write like they're all really awesome cars. Right? They get paid to draw distinctions, right? And to point out what doesn't work on any of these. Now, clearly with those slides, Steve, either there was something lost in translation, or I will say this. There have been some studies recently. Now, Consumer Reports gets theirs from interviewing owners, right? They're doing like polling, right? We'll see how good their polling is overall. They're not doing statistical analysis of service visits, for example. Cox Automotive actually has the resources to do that. They can pull service visit data, and CDK Global is another automotive provider that can pull some of this information. And they have done some reporting that shows that there are more service visits for EV owners, right, than gas car owners. But I think, to your point, Eric, and if you dig into the data, a lot of it says it's technology related. Now, if you're going from a car that had a CD player and knobs and switches to do your climate control to a car where the whole thing is in this whole new designed computer, and it's like a multi-phase stage computer with a whole new interface, and this is the first time around, right, on this Volkswagen ID4, and so you got to get it right, and they screw it up a little bit, right? There are some mistakes here and there. And there are some glitches. They fix via software, right? And I have people come in all the time. People love their Volkswagens. And they knew when they went EV, it was going to be a Volkswagen. And then they read something that it says that the ID4 sucked, right? And so they're looking for something else. And I'm like, well, I have an ID4. Do you want to come check it out? Why did they say it sucked? I'm like, well, they said it was glitchy and it didn't drive good and all that. I'm like, well, let me show you the car, and then you tell me, right? And they get into it, and they're like, this is the most technologically sophisticated thing I've ever sat in. It's like a spaceship, but it's a car, and it feels like a Volkswagen. It's awesome, right? And then we get done with the test drive, and they're like, yeah, those journalists didn't know what they're talking about. I love my VWs, and I want to go EV, right? And so I think that's the real experience of real people with me. Every person who buys an EV from Greenwave, and we're coming up on our 500th customer, right? I tell them, if anything goes wrong with your car, give me a call, even if it's out of our certification period, out of our warranty. I love to learn about these things. If there's anything I can do to help, let me know. We're not exactly the Maytag repairman, but we do not get a lot of calls like that. Our number one service call is, help, I can't unplug my car. I can't unplug it, right? Because they've got a charge lock on. They forgot they got a charge lock. They think the car.
That's why I put the video up there. We showed it last time, but just so that it's clear, how many models are there. It should be clear from Jesse's background and my background, but all of the potential models, in most cases, you're going to be able to shop at a place like Greenwave EV. These are the advantages of having not only the expertise in there, but also the models on hand. You read that the ID4 sucked. Well, come and have a look. There's one on the lot. You heard that the Ioniq 5 was the perfect thing for you. Well, maybe take a look at this. It's got these things that maybe match your use case or don't. Or as Crazy Postman puts it, his Tesla seems to be even missing turn signal stalks. I hope they don't even have driver information clusters. So, some things maybe you want and you didn't realize that they didn't have them. So
probably doesn't even have an on and off switch.
Yeah, you may have to actually have a phone with you. Shock horror.
Although I will tell you, on and off switch, PSA, right? Buying a car without an on and off switch is a huge bonus. This, Walter, in your Volvo, because if you don't turn it off, it's easy to walk away from a car with it still on, and that's how you burn out the 12-volt battery. Are you sure that's not what was happening to you in the first few months, Steve?
Well, that's it. I mean, to be fair to Hyundai, they do send you 500 messages through the BlueLink app that your car's not locked. So you can't lock it, of course, from the app. So it's it's one of those things. But these are I think that kind of goes to the point of reliability as well. Like not just the infotainment stuff, but also first-year models. A lot of these manufacturers, even as good as they are with Hyundai or Kia or any of them, are just figuring this EV thing out. They're starting to to put these things in and realize what the ups and downs of electric vehicles are. So this is just, I've been into the dealership plenty of times, but nothing for showstoppers, just annoying little things that they need to do over updates. So it is part of it, but I think having the resources like Greenwave there, especially when you're buying used and maybe people have a laundry list of questions, is just a huge benefit. So I'm grateful you're on my doorstep, Jesse, for the time coming. But I need a used EV, and I'm sure hundreds of others in the Northeast are as well. We're right on time here again, the usual time, but we did go about 25 minutes over the intended time, so we're not breaking any streaks. I don't know if Walter had any final questions before we head out, but after that, I will respect your time and sign us off.
No, Jesse, it's been very insightful. I appreciate you joining.
Yeah, thank you so much. Let me put up the links again so that we have your closing details. www.greenwaveev.com is the place to go for inventory. There's also a learning center on there. Lots of the information you might need to buy a used EV. You can also use this IRS used clean vehicle credit to find some of the ins and outs, but probably just giving Jesse a call or his team will be the way to go for that information. Jesse, anything else that you're working on at the moment? Anything you'd like to call out before we call time?
No, I think I'm just really grateful to you, Steve, for having me on today. Eric, it was such a pleasure to talk with you. Walter, my goodness, I think it's a really exciting time. I'm really grateful to know you guys, and let's all keep fighting the good fight, and hope we get a better tomorrow with electric vehicles on the way.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. So visit greenwaveev.com, take a look at the inventory, get a feel for prices and the best deals, which I don't think we even touched on tonight, but certainly I'd be looking for a used Nissan Ariya if they're at those prices we talked about.
They're on the website, right?
There you
Call
go.
me. They're coming. The Nissan Ariya will be there by the weekend. Check me out.
Thank you for your time. Thank you everybody for watching. As I say, check the webpage for the slightly off schedule month of November. I hope everybody survives next week and we come out the other side happy and healthy. Let's say that. Cheers everybody, and indeed cheers nerds. Thank you.
Yep.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Bye guys.